Welcome to Rebook Recaps, A Court of Thorns and Roses, chapters 6 to 10 recapped. Tap the like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell for more story recaps. Chapter 6. Feyre, still shaken by her encounter with Tamlin and the fairy world, begins to adjust to her new life at the Spring Court. The environment is beautiful, but she's uneasy and unsure about the customs and dangers that surround her. Tamlin's presence continues to confuse Feyre. He's kind and protective, but she knows he's hiding something from her, and his moods fluctuate unpredictably. She can sense a deep sorrow in him, but doesn't yet understand its source. Lucien, Tamlin's loyal emissary, becomes an unlikely ally for Feyre. Though his sharp tongue and sarcastic remarks annoy her, he eventually offers her some insight into life at the Spring Court, especially the rules and the magic that govern the land. Feyre is introduced to the concept of the blight that plagues the land, a mysterious force that has caused suffering in the fairy realms. Tamlin and his court are working to combat it, though Feyre doesn't yet grasp the full gravity of their struggle. Lucien takes Feyre on a tour of the Spring Court, showing her the different areas, including the luxurious gardens and elegant halls. Feyre notices that while everything is lush and beautiful, there is an underlying tension, as if something is wrong. As Feyre spends more time in the Spring Court, she grows increasingly frustrated with the restrictions placed on her. Though she's no longer a prisoner, she feels isolated and trapped by the unfamiliar rules and the strange world she's now a part of. Feyre's resentment toward Tamlin begins to fester. Despite his kindness, she feels manipulated and confused by his actions. Her mistrust deepens, especially when she senses that there is more to Tamlin's past than he's willing to reveal. Over dinner, Feyre has a tense conversation with Tamlin, Lucien, and some of the other fairies. She learns more about the politics of the fairy realms and how the different courts are interwoven with one another. It becomes clear that Tamlin's court is struggling with something larger than just the blight. Feyre has a moment of introspection. She misses her family, especially her father and sisters, and wonders how they are faring in the human world. Her guilt over leaving them behind gnaws at her, but she knows there's little she can do from the Spring Court. That night, Feyre lies awake in her room, plagued by nightmares and unsettling thoughts. She realizes that her journey in this new world has only just begun, and that the mysteries surrounding Tamlin and his court are far deeper and darker than she imagined. Chapter 7. Feyre wakes up to an invitation from Tamlin to join him on a hunt. Though she feels conflicted, she agrees, wanting to learn more about the world she's now a part of and to escape the confines of the Spring Court for a while. The hunt begins in the forest outside the court, and Feyre is struck by the raw beauty of the landscape. The wildlife is abundant, and the air is thick with magic. She feels both invigorated and out of place, like an intruder in this world. During the hunt, Feyre's connection with Tamlin deepens, and she starts to see him in a new light. She's struck by his strength, grace, and the mystery surrounding his true nature. Still, she's cautious, aware that she doesn't know the full truth about him. Tamlin demonstrates his incredible combat skills, effortlessly taking down a massive beast that Feyre can't even fathom facing. Feyre is in awe, but also overwhelmed by the violent and otherworldly nature of the creatures in this realm. Lucien accompanies them, his sharp eye keeping watch for any danger. He is more critical of Feyre's participation in the hunt, questioning her ability to keep up with the fairies' pace. This further highlights the divide between her and the Fae. Feyre is forced to confront her own limitations, feeling outmatched and weak compared to the Fae. Her human senses are no match for their heightened abilities, and she struggles to keep up as they move deeper into the forest. During the hunt, Feyre's emotions become more complex. She begins to feel both attraction and resentment toward Tamlin. She doesn't fully trust him, but she can't deny the magnetic pull between them, making her increasingly confused about her feelings. As the hunt continues, Feyre witnesses the cruelty of the Fey world firsthand. When a creature is wounded, they show no mercy, and the scene is starkly different from anything she's experienced in her old human life. Feyre's thoughts begin to wander as the hunt progresses, thinking about her family and whether they're safe. She worries about how they're surviving without her, feeling torn between her responsibilities to them and the reality of her situation in the fairy realm. The hunt ends with Tamlin's victory and a tense moment between him and Feyre. Despite the tension, there's a fragile sense of understanding between them. Feyre realizes that she's becoming more attached to Tamlin, but she doesn't know if that's a blessing or a curse. Chapter 8. Back at the Spring Court, Feyre is still processing her feelings about the hunt. She feels a strange mix of admiration and discomfort toward Tamlin, realizing that his presence is both calming and unsettling in equal measure. Feyre spends more time with Lucienne, and while their interactions remain prickly, she begins to appreciate his blunt honesty. He opens up to her about the difficulties of life in the fairy realm and the burdens that Tamlin carries, which Feyre hadn't fully understood before. Feyre tries to adapt to the daily rhythms of life at the Spring Court. She's given more responsibilities, like managing the garden and preparing food, but these tasks do little to ease her growing sense of restlessness. Lucienne continues to fill in gaps about the fairy world, telling Feyre about the other courts and the politics that govern the land. Feyre learns that the Spring Court is only one part of a complex system of power struggles, and Tamlin is far more involved in this conflict than she had realized. Despite the beauty of the court and the hospitality of Tamlin's household, Feyre struggles with her growing isolation. She feels disconnected from everything and everyone, even as she becomes more entangled in the lives of the Fae. One evening, Feyre has a quiet conversation with Tamlin, where she presses him for more answers about the blight and the threats facing the fairy realms. Tamlin, however, remains evasive, giving her only cryptic responses that leave her feeling more frustrated and confused. Feyre is haunted by memories of her past, particularly her life before the Fae curse. She remembers how she took care of her family and how her life was defined by their needs. In the fairy world, however, she is no longer the person she once was, and this identity shift leaves her feeling lost. The tension between Feyre and Tamlin continues to build. Feyre senses that Tamlin's kindness may come with ulterior motives, but she can't help but be drawn to him. Her growing attraction to him complicates her feelings and makes her question her own desires. Feyre's loneliness becomes more palpable as she spends time alone in her room, contemplating her future. She starts to wonder if there's any way she can regain control of her life, or if she's forever bound to the fairy realm. The chapter ends with a moment of quiet reflection for Feyre. She lies in bed, unable to shake the feeling that something darker is lurking just beyond the beautiful exterior of the Spring Court. Chapter 9. Feyre is once again summoned by Tamlin, but this time it's for a different purpose, to accompany him to a gathering with other Fae from different courts. She's hesitant but agrees, hoping to learn more about the political dynamics between the courts. The journey to the gathering is both exciting and unsettling for Feyre. The deeper she goes into the fairy realms, the more she senses the underlying danger. Though the courts are filled with beauty and power, there's a tension that makes her feel like an outsider. At the gathering, Feyre is introduced to powerful Fae from the other courts. Each one has a distinct aura of power, and Feyre quickly realizes that she is in the presence of beings far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Tamlin acts as a mediator at the gathering, and Feyre notices the careful balance he maintains between showing authority and appearing vulnerable. His interactions with the other Fae make it clear that his position is fragile, and that the fate of the Spring Court is in constant jeopardy. The gathering is filled with high-stakes discussions about the blight and the political unrest that threatens all of Fairy. Feyre listens intently, trying to absorb everything she can, though she struggles to understand the complexities of fairy politics. During the event, Feyre has an unexpected encounter with a mysterious Fae named Rhysand. His presence is magnetic, and Feyre immediately senses that he's not someone to be trifled with. His flirtatious manner and piercing gaze unsettle her. Rhysand makes it clear that he knows more about Feyre's situation than she realizes. He hints at darker truths and offers cryptic advice, leaving Feyre confused and on edge. His words suggest that there's more to her presence in the fairy world than she understands, and she begins to wonder just how much Tamlin has kept from her. The atmosphere of the gathering grows more tense as discussions about the blight intensify. Feyre feels like an outsider, unsure of who to trust or what to believe. The other Fae seem to regard her with a mix of curiosity and disdain, and she can't help but feel like a pawn in their political games. Tamlin notices her discomfort and tries to reassure her, but his efforts only make Feyre more suspicious. His protective nature seems to border on possessiveness, and she begins to question whether he sees her as an equal or just something to be protected and controlled. The gathering ends with Feyre feeling more isolated than ever. As they leave, Tamlin's distant behaviour only adds to her growing doubts. She realises that the fairy realm is far more dangerous and complicated than she could have imagined, and she's no longer sure where she fits in. Chapter 10. Back at the spring court, Feyre tries to shake off the uneasy feelings from the gathering. Despite the beauty of the court, she can't escape the tension and uncertainty that has been building inside her. She feels like she's constantly walking on a tightrope, unsure of what will happen next. Tamlin's behaviour grows more erratic. He seems more withdrawn, and there are moments where his intense gaze shifts to something darker, something Feyre can't quite grasp. She begins to feel that there's a storm brewing, and she doesn't know if she's ready to face it. Lucien is still a source of occasional support, but his presence is increasingly frustrating to Feyre. He is blunt, often sarcastic, and never hesitant to point out her weaknesses. However, his candour begins to break down some of Feyre's walls, and she starts to open up to him about her fears. Feyre struggles with her desire for freedom. She knows that she can't go back to her old life, but she also feels trapped in the spring court. The restrictions of the court seem to be smothering her, and her longing for independence grows stronger by the day. One evening, Feyre ventures out into the garden to clear her mind. The beauty of the place does little to soothe her anxiety, and she's reminded of the isolation she feels. She still doesn't know whom she can trust in the fairy world. During her time in the garden, Feyre experiences a strange moment of clarity. She recalls the words of Rhysand from the gathering, and a seed of doubt begins to grow in her mind. She can't shake the feeling that there's something she's missing, something crucial that Tamlin hasn't told her. Feyre's internal conflict reaches a boiling point. She's torn between her attraction to Tamlin and her growing suspicions about his intentions. She also worries about her family back in the human realm, but she feels helpless to do anything about it while she remains trapped in the fairy world. Her thoughts are interrupted when Tamlin unexpectedly arrives in the garden. He seems different, colder, and more distant than usual. There's an underlying tension in the air, and Feyre wonders if he's aware of her growing doubts. The two of them have a tense conversation, with Feyre pressing him for answers about the blight and his past. Tamlin remains guarded, offering little more than cryptic reassurances. His refusal to be transparent only deepens her mistrust. As the chapter ends, Feyre is left feeling more uncertain than ever about her place in the fairy realm. She's starting to understand that the stakes are higher than she thought, and the dangerous game being played by the courts could have far-reaching consequences, one she might not be prepared to face.